My name is Savino. I'm gonna talk about our work, One Size Does Not Fit All, quantifying the risk of malicious app encounters for different Android user profiles. So I want to start the talk with the title that we dedicated to our work, and in particular, One Size is referred to the fact that current security solutions nowadays adopt a one-size-fits-all user approach, which means that given a problem, given a threat, for example, malware, phishing, scam, the goal of security companies usually is to produce a single solution to protect all kinds of users. And those solutions usually are based on threat models that focus on the mythical average user and their common security and practice needs. However, this does not fit all. As, for example, in recent years, there has been a growing body of works, and I think we have also had evidence of some of them in this session, that is focusing on users with particular risk that might experience more sophisticated or more frequent threats just because of their particular characteristics. For example, their interests, their education, their profession, and their political status. And somehow this body of works concludes that current security, privacy, and digital safety solutions fail to consider particular classes of users. And the needs of this group of population should motivate security vendors to provide more personalized solutions. And since, providing security solution is more or less aligns very well to what we do in our company, we decided to investigate this better. So this work was born as a large-scale measurement. Our goal was not to focus on a single community. So our goal was to compare different communities. And for this reason, our analysis is based on quantitative indicators and not on qualitative, for example, indicators like interviews. So we focus on objective metrics that we were able to extract from our telemetry. However, this makes quite difficult to identify and then compare risk across communities because, of course, we don't have customer information about gender, political status, sexual orientation, and so on. So we decided to focus on mobile devices because mobile devices, smartphones are nowadays really tied to the user and they are able to provide us a great source of data to identify user communities. And what we did was to leverage user interest, for example, user interested in game or social media, business application, finance to define the communities. So for this work, we had at our disposal a telemetry made of 12 million devices, for which we only were able to read the list of installed applications, and then we enriched by querying other systems, for example, VirusTotal to retrieve further information. And those are Android users. And what we study is the risk of those devices encountering malware or any other potential unwanted application, and then comparing this risk across communities. So this work is divided mainly in three different parts. So in the first part, we carry an exploration of risk factors. So we try to identify whether there exists quantitative indicator that could reflect somehow the risk of encountering this malware or potential unwanted application, and whether these risks are different between each other and how much. In the second part, we carry a profile-based risk analysis, so we verify whether this risk varies across different profiles and user population. And in the last part, we somehow combine the first two. So we carry a multi-feature risk analysis, and we try to understand whether the user profile that we created are useful to build, together with the features that we identified, models that help us to predict such risks. So let's start with the first part, the exploration of risk factors. So for this, we used 5 risk factor classes that were not really investigated for mobile devices, but we kinda inherited them from other environments. For example, the desktop environment when investigated Windows malware. And here the idea is try to understand whether for each risk factor, whether we increase it or decrease it, is gonna automatically increase or decrease the risk. So we focus on volume-based features, in particular, the number of installed applications on the device and the days of the activity. Diversity-based features, namely the number of applications installed, the number of application categories, and the number of distinct signers, so the application publishers. We also consider reputation-based features, namely the application popularity, the number of alternative markets installed, and the percentage of applications that are actually installed from those alternative markets. We include also software update features. We verify like whether the frequency of updating those applications can tell us something about the risk. And finally, we include some geographical information about the device, so whether this device was seen in different countries and in particular continents. These factors were simultaneously modeled and linked to the risk of encountering potential unwanted application and malware by using a generalized linear model that is outputting odds ratio for each factor. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go deeper here, but this, let's say, odd ratio is simply reflecting like the probability of encountering malware when considering a factor to be high, for example, here for a device to be active more than 28 days, compared to when this factor is low. So in this case, being lower, being active less than 4 days. And intuitively, if this ratio is greater than 1, is suggesting that increasing this factor will increase the risk, otherwise will reduce the risk. So we identified 3 high impact factors, namely the number of alternative markets, the distinct signers, and the percentage of the applications that were installed from alternative markets that were able to, in their highest value, to increase the risk respectively 17, 9, and 7 times. Some medium low impact factors, so those related to the geography and the volume-based feature, the number of activity and installed applications that were able to increase the risk between 1.1 and 2.3 times. But also we identified some risk-reducing factors, namely the application popularity, so the more popular the application installed, the less risk, but also the more frequent the update rate on the device, the less risk. And quite surprisingly, also we found that there is a negative relationship between the number of application categories on the device and the risk of the device itself. So in the second part, we carried a profile-based risk analysis. So as I said at the beginning of the presentation, we want to leverage user interest to define the communities. And what we have at our disposal for each device is a list of applications and their categories. So to do so, we use recommender system, the theory behind recommender systems. And here the intuition is that the users who install similar apps of particular categories are likely to have the same interest. So what we did was to use the 33 categories from the Google Play Store plus the unknown categories, that is somehow grouping those applications for which we couldn't determine a category, for example, because they were installed from alternative markets. And we created single category groups, for example, devices and people interested in games, 2 category groups, people interested at the same time in games and social media, and 2 special categories, the one of the average user, who show no particular interest, and the one of mixed profiles, which show interest in 3 or more categories. This is an example of just a subset of the more than 500 profiles that we were able to identify. And one of the findings is that, of course, those profiles are not uniformly distributed across our customer space. So there are more prevalent profiles, like, for example, the one of the gamers, and less prevalent, like those of people, the one of people interested in photography and video players. The first thing we did was to verify the exposure of each of those profiles to malicious application, and we found these to be quite different. So for example, 35% of the people interested in social media and using video players is encountering at least one malicious application, while, for example, for average users, this is just 8%. Another interesting finding is that the interest of the profile itself is somehow reflecting a part of the risk. For example, we were able to measure that some interests like games, for example, are more risky, which means that people interested in this kind of category are installed actually malicious applications that come from games, from that particular category, while this is not true for other categories, for example, for social media and for people interested in books and education who are installing malicious applications from other categories. So in the last part, we carried a multi-feature risk analysis. So we verified that particular user interests result in different risk profiles. But actually, are those profiles useful to predict future risks? And for example, if I know that a device belongs to a gamer, can I use this information to build a specific model and to predict its threats? And would this be easier or not? So to verify this hypothesis, we carried out an experiment. So we took a random forest classifiers and used the very same feature classes I described at the beginning of the presentation, plus some profile information. For example, this device belongs to a gamer with 50% of the application being games. As output, we wanted to measure as this device encountered malicious applications, and we carried this experiment into approaches. So a one-fits-all approach. So we trained a single model for all the users, and then a personalized approach in which we used a single model for each profile. And as you may guess, it's obvious that by using a single model for each profile is going to work better, and indeed this is the case. So on average, we were able to find 14% improvement in the prediction accuracy. But there were some profiles for which this worked better. Like, for example, for the social media and video players user, the improvement was upwards 30%. While there were some profiles for which like this improvement is just a single-digit improvement, and this suggests that those profiles could benefit. So first of all, for personalized model, but also for personalized security solution, even more than other profiles. So to conclude this talk, we verified that also at large scale, the exposure of interest-based groups is different, and also that risk factors have different relevance. And indeed, we found that there are high impact factors, such as the diversity of app signers and the use of alternative market that are more correlated with the risk of encountering malicious application. We also showed how the interest may itself introduce more risk for particular groups, for example, the one of gamers, and also that per profile classifiers outperform one-size-fits-all model. But still, some profiles needs more investigation. So before concluding, let's give a bit overview on how do we use this result. So of course, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the long-term goal is to provide personalized security solutions to the customers. But also this study has also some short-term actionable items. For example, the automatically auto-tune of AV parameters, for example, to increase the frequency or the scan extension for some profiles that are identified to be more risky. But also to craft personalized security warnings against habituation. So there was a study last year that has been carried on the very same telemetry we used in this study, that showed how users were removing malicious application on Android after 24 days after the first notification. So we think that a customized warning might help reducing this time. And also the findings of this work might help to raise awareness towards interest-specific threats. For example, notify specific malicious threats targeting particular categories of users. Thank you, and I will be happy to take questions if you have any.